Number 1. I'm a 25-year-old female from Ireland. This story happened when I was 20. It still creeps me out to think about it. So I decided to take my parents' caravan to a seaside destination for 3 days. Roughly 3 miles away from my caravan site was a famous tourist attraction, and I got up early one morning and decided to make the trip there. I borrowed my mom's bicycle for this wee getaway, and so set to cycling the 3 miles. The journey consists of a mile through the village I was staying in, and then 2 miles down a lovely country pathway. The pathway leads straight to the tourist attraction. I had cycled through the village and was on the pathway. There was no one else that I passed along the way. The pathway seemed empty, but beautiful. While cycling, I saw a class-old abandoned railway track up on a bank. I think the railway track must have been an old children's ride because it was rather small. It had trees all around it, and their leaves were drooping over it, and there was moss growing on the tracks, all very picturesque. I was into taking photographs at the time, and I wanted to take photographs of this. I stopped and got off my bike. If you can imagine, I was on the path, and up a level was the bank that the tracks were on. I put my bike on the stand and went up the bank and began taking some wee photographs. I was happy snapping away, and I didn't notice a man walking the path towards me. At this point, I was taking pictures of the birds in the trees. I didn't think anything of the man until he stopped at my bike, down on the path. I looked at him but continued taking pictures as his presence made me feel uncomfortable immediately. He was a middle-aged man, roughly 5'6". He was a bit overweight, had a beard, and he had those glasses that make your eyes look big. He was wearing black trousers and a blue waterproof coat. For a few seconds he didn't say hello, didn't smile, just stared. He asked me, "Are you taking pictures of the birds?" I smiled politely and said yes, they are very pretty. Now it didn't feel like he was looking at me. It felt like he was watching me. And although I understand that most people are harmless, he gave me the heebie-jeebies. After another prolonged pause, as if he was thinking of something to say, he said, "I saw a dead bird with his head broken off down in there. Do you want to see it?" When he said "down in there," he was pointing to the right-hand side of the pathway, which went down another level into deep, dark forestry. The exact spot he was pointing to was an opening in the trees and an unofficial walkway down into the forest, really just a muddy downward path. I said no thank you. He continued to watch, stare at me, and bearing in mind he was standing right beside my bicycle, so I felt like I couldn't escape if I wanted to. He asked me a third time if I wanted to see it. It was so unnerving because he wasn't smiling or acting friendly and relaxed. It was as if he was just trying to get something done. At this point, I took out my phone from my bag and began to call my mom. Should have been the police. When he saw me do that, he took a second, and then he finally said, Okay, put his hand up and walked away, looking back at me. When he was far enough away, I went straight to my bicycle and sped off, all the while on the phone to my mom, telling her all about it. When I got back to my caravan that night, I checked every cupboard and the bathroom so many times. I made sure the door was absolutely locked. I also rang the police and made them aware of what happened, in case some poor girl would unfortunately say yes. The police told me I was right to call, because that doesn't sound like normal behavior. I hate thinking about what he may have been up to. Maybe it was innocent, but you can't take a chance with something like that. I was tempted to go back and check to see if there really was a dead bird. But I think I made the right decision not to. Number 2.
Just to give you some context, I'm 36 years old and was around 12 when this particular encounter had occurred. I just started 7th grade, which was junior high school in the city that I grew up in. I tried out for the girls' baseball team and made the A team, which was the varsity squad, where the B team was akin to junior varsity. I was one of 3 7th graders that made the A team, so for me it was a great accomplishment. On that Friday, Coach had given us a list of items we needed to buy for our uniform over the weekend. One of the items were indoor basketball sneakers. We were expecting an Indian summer that summer in Michigan, and it was a beautiful, sunny Saturday afternoon. I decided to take advantage of the weather and walk 2 miles to Dunham Sporting Goods to buy my sneakers. I was wearing a pair of cut-off jean shorts that I had made out of an old pair of jeans that started to rip due to wear and tear. I had a Steelers jersey on, but one that was made for women's, it was shorter than the other jerseys that were designed for men. It came down to about my belt on my shorts. I threw on my pair of Converse and headed out the house. When I arrived at the store, I found myself a sweet pair of Air Jordans. I made my purchase and began the walk back home. I had developed earlier than most females, so catcalls from men driving past was something that, though I never enjoyed, I'd grown accustomed to the previous year. About halfway home, a Jeep passed me, and the teenage male on the passenger side was leaning over the door. He shouted, "Hey baby, I'll give you a ride." And then he stuck his tongue out. As usual, I ignored him and kept walking. I hadn't quite mastered the middle finger maneuver yet. I turned down the main street that my street intersected with. However, I still had about 12 blocks to go. Though this was a busy road, the speed limit was still 25 miles per hour, because it was a residential area. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the car slowing. I didn't look, thinking that the car was about to park in front of my house. Eventually, as I walked, I realized the car had no intention of parking, but was attempting to keep pace with me. I looked without turning my head and could see that the man, around 40 years old, was leering at me. The car looked like a 90s Lincoln Town Car that was golden color. An eerie feeling started to commence as the man just stared, not saying anything. Thinking back, he looked like a predator stalking his prey. I heard the motor of the power window as he pressed the button down to bring it down and said, "Hey honey, can I give you a ride somewhere? I noticed you've been walking for quite a while." I thought, this guy's been following me, and I wondered for how long. I turned towards him, smiled politely, and said, "No thank you, I live no more than a block up." I was hoping that it would chase him off, believing that I was close to my house. He replied, "Oh, no problem. Just get in and I'll drive you the rest of the way. That way you can let your little feet rest for a minute, they must be exhausted." At this point, I remember thinking that he reminded me of a Jack Nicholson movie, The Shining, because his brow was low and he had the same maniacal 100-yard stare. A small toddler playing at the apartment building on the side street, kitty corner to the busy road, caught my eye. I replied, "No, that's really nice of you to offer, but I'm fine. I make this trek often, I'm used to it." At that point, he threw the passenger door open and said, "I'm not asking, now get in the fucking car." For a moment, I didn't think I heard him right. I was thinking, I must be mistaken. Who would just say something like that? Who would be so bold as to abduct a 12-year-old girl in broad daylight on a busy road? I turned around and said, "What was that?" He unbuckled his seatbelt and put his vehicle in park. He yelled louder, "I said get the fuck in the car!" A flood of adrenaline rushed through my body and my eyes immediately focused on the toddler playing across the street. I thought to myself, parents, his parents must be home. I darted into the road. My mind told me that if this man grabbed me, passing cars would probably think he was a father disciplining me for some reason. I heard a car slam on its brakes. I kept running to avoid impact. "You stupid little bitch!" a middle-aged man yelled as he laid on his horn. I didn't care. The only thing I cared about was making my way toward that little boy. When I reached him, I picked him up and ran into his house, where I saw his mother standing at the kitchen sink washing dishes. Her eyes were wide as I clearly startled her. I put him down, walking to her, and she picked him up. I ducked down a little bit to hide from the windows just in case he was chasing me. I said to the woman, "I'm so sorry, but a man just tried to abduct me on a busy road out there. I'm only 12 and I don't know what to do, so I ran towards your son playing outside because I knew an adult had to be home. I'm so sorry for barreling in your door without knocking, but I didn't know what else to do." After I explained myself, she had calmed down. I looked out the window and saw his car slowly creeping up the street. "That's the guy right there," I said. "Oh my God, sweetie, are you okay?" she said. "Yeah, I'm just really scared," I said as tears started to fill my eyes. "I'm so sorry, hon. I'd take you home, but my fiance took her car to work and he won't be back until late tonight. You can stay as long as you want. Would you like me to phone the police?" My mind was so flustered, as I'm sure hers was, but I said, "No, I just want to get a hold of my mom. Meg's your phone." With that, his car creeped by slowly again, but this time going in the opposite direction. I could see he didn't know where I was because his head was looking left and right over and over, but he never looked directly at the apartment. I dialed my mom's number, but the phone just rang over and over until the answering machine picked up. I left a message explaining what happened, and that if she heard it, I needed her to wait by the phone until I rang back. After hanging up, I remember she had planned to mow the lawn that day. I figured she couldn't hear the telephone over the sound of the lawnmower. I sat in the apartment for another 15 minutes, and he hadn't driven by again. I had repeatedly been trying to call my mom to no avail. "Let me call the police so they can get you home. I don't think it's safe for you to be walking with this creeper out there looking for you," the woman said. That would have been the smart thing to do, but I could only think of one thing, which was to get to my mom. The idea of a bunch of police officers around seemed pretty intimidating and overwhelming to me. I said, "I want to tell you that I really appreciate you letting me stay here, and I'm so sorry for bursting into your home like this, but my mind just told me I'd be safe with the parents." "Oh, no problem. That was so smart of you. I'm glad you were able to reason in a situation like that because I don't think I could have," she replied. I told her a little white lie and said, "I only live 4 blocks up and he hasn't driven by in a while now. I'm just going to run through people's backyards until I get to my house. It'll be okay." "Are you sure? I really feel like I should call the cops. I wouldn't be able to forgive myself if something happened to you," she said. "Nothing's gonna happen. I'll be okay. Thank you so much again." With that, I immediately rushed out of her back door, not giving her another chance to argue with me about calling the cops. I was so full of adrenaline still, I ran like the wind. Running the entire 10 blocks felt like nothing. I kept my word and backyarded it was the entire way. I hopped fence after fence until I made it to my yard. I could see my mother putting our lawnmower in the garage. I ran to her and collapsed in her arms sobbing. When I was finally able to form the words to tell her what happened, she said, "Oh my God, I heard police sirens and I felt scared. Thank God you're okay." She lectured me on not letting the woman call the police, but she understood that I just wanted her and she felt bad she wasn't able to hear the phone. My mom called the police and I sat in the living room with the officer who made the report. I really wish I was able to get his license plate number, but I had one thing on my mind, which was survival. They never caught up with that creeper, and ever since I prayed that no one else would be unfortunate enough to cross his path. To the woman that let me ride it out in her house that day, putting her and her child at risk, I'd love to meet you again so I could thank you for your generosity.
Number 3.
I submitted a story about my mom yesterday, but decided to write another, this time about me. Please forgive me for my mistakes. It's not one encounter, but a few, and it's been happening for a while now. Whenever my male friends offered to lead me home, I always declined. After that, I no longer do. One night I was coming back from my evening class. It was late and there were few people in the metro. I try not to stare at people and usually wash my shoes, but this time I felt someone watching me and saw a man with a red hoodie. I thought nothing about it because people usually stare at each other on the train, but then he moved closer to me. I had to transfer on another line. When I noticed he followed me, I got to that station and tried to go as far as possible. This guy saw me and walked towards me, and he stood behind me. Now it was getting on my nerves. I saw 3 or 4 Iranian boys my age and headed to them. They noticed this man too and stayed with me for some time. I got on the train, and when he ended up in my wagon, I managed to get out of the train on the last second and left him there. I waited for another train and started to walk to my house. I don't need more than 10 minutes from metro station, and I've never felt unsafe. Also, I know almost every stray dog in that area. I often give them food and play with them, so I felt like I had bodyguards. As soon as I started walking, I noticed a car started to follow me very slowly beside the sidewalk. I tried to pretend I didn't notice while I picked my dad's number and asked him to pick me up, but changed my mind. Because he's overprotective, really emotional about such things. Meanwhile, this car won't go away. I silently grabbed my hair stick from my bag. It has 3 sticks and it's really, really sharp and thick. I'm sure I can kill a person with it. I remember every kidnap story I've heard and started to think about what I would do if somebody touched me. I'm ready to slit their throat with it or crave their eyes out, but nobody got out of the car. I went home safely. I've seen this car parked nearby, facing my windows, but we have thick curtains, and I turn off the lights to peek outside. What alarmed me is that I saw this car parked at my friend's house when we visited her. I didn't mention it with anyone, and don't want to seek help from the police because they haven't done anything. But I gave a book to my friend and left them a note jokingly mentioning that if something happened to me, start searching from here. After that, twice in the metro, 2 different men approached me and politely asked, "Are you?" And I shook my head. He said, "Oh, I'm sorry," and left. Next time, someone else asked me if I knew. And again, I said I didn't because I really did not. A few days ago, someone's calls woke me up, saying something similar. I was really pissed off by now. Ended the call saying, "You made a huge mistake by calling me. Huge." I saved numbers, and it didn't take me in my laptop more than an hour to find their names, their family members' names, bank accounts, addresses, passport numbers. Fine. If you're going to stalk me, I'll stalk you back. I wrote down everything about them and saved it on a place where no one checks it, but if something happens to me, they'll start searching my belongings there. No one has called me again, but if they do, I'll call them by name, and tell them that they chose the wrong person to fuck with.
Number 4. It was Friday night at around 4 in the morning. I had just departed from a former roommate's house where there was a party being hosted. We hadn't seen each other in a long time since his moving out, and the uncomfortable distance between both of our houses. But that night I decided to meet up with him based on the sheer nostalgia. We both live in relatively small towns, and the distance between these towns is made up of 40 miles of isolated road. Wanting to feel the comfort of my own bed, I decided to leave his house to embark on the desolate journey to mine. The drive was calming. I always loved driving at night, and uneventful until around the halfway mark. At around 25 miles down this long stretch, I stumbled upon a small vehicle on the side of the road. The door to the driver's seat was wide open, and the lights were still on, illuminating the interior. What made me pull over to investigate was probably a combination of curiosity and concern, but I can't say for sure. I peeked my head through the door and saw an empty, nevertheless disorganized interior of a car. The keys were still in the ignition. At this point, I decided that amateur exploration was not a great idea and decided to contact the authorities, letting them know that this probably wasn't an extreme emergency. but I was dead wrong. Seconds after hanging up, I heard a low, humanoid groan, something that still resonates in my mind today. I follow the noise for around 20 feet and find a woman. She was bloodied and beaten and in desperate need for medical assistance. I phoned the police again, this time with a different dispatcher. I frantically inform him on the current situation, and less than 10 minutes later, a squad of cop cars came along the stretch of road. I led them to the woman, who was now groaning even louder, not making out discernible words. She was rushed to the hospital, where she explained that she was held at gunpoint in her apartment complex's parking lot and forced to drive out to this specific road. That's where the male assailant beat her senseless and left, informing her that he'd return to finish the job. Despite the man's fleeing on foot, there was no one found. The woman kept her identity hidden amongst the media, I presume, as I was unable to track down any information on her other than what I was informed. I was never able to find a different route to my ex-roommate's house, so subsequently, I still travel on that road to this very day.